What's up, my family? Listen, first-time listener, or you've been here the whole damn time. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, giddy up, let's go, no notes.
That's my baby. That's my baby.
We're going at it at 110%.
I just want 5 minutes of happiness, please. Just give me 5 minutes.
And they scored! They did it!
Slap.
What the hell was that? Oh, yeah!
What the f*** are you talking about?
All right, everybody, welcome in. This is Fantasy Real Talk from the Real Talk Studios, exclusively on A2D Radio. We'll be found on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, X, Instagram, YouTube. Stream us wherever you get your podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio, and iTunes. Always remember to hit that like, hit that subscribe, turn those notifications on. Week one's in the books. We got actual game data to break down tonight. We got it all covered. We got studs and duds from week one. We got waiver pickups, and we will get into week two. We are still alive in our show Survivor Pool with the Washington Commanders getting it done over the Arizona Cardinals, even though we agreed upon, Jesse, the Baltimore Ravens last week. But no harm, no foul. We got the Ravens for later. We survived in advance, just like the Eagles did on Sunday. Cowboys had no problem. We'll get into all that later. As always, we are brought to you by Baggio's Breads, located in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, home of the best stuffed breads, tomato pie, sandwiches, cutlets, meatballs. Mention A2D Radio for 10% off your purchase. Let's start with our poll question. Get right into it. Now, Mike, me and you were talking about it. Jesse, I don't know who you did. I didn't have a good week one. I am in 6 leagues. I went 2-4. We have weather concerns. So our poll question tonight, you should overreact to poor performances or good performances in week one. I'm not worried about it yet. I think, like, fantasy football, I'm a big fantasy baseball guy too. You know, fantasy baseball, it's cycles. Every 6 weeks, it kind of cycles. I do think it's important to get off to a fast start in fantasy football because you want to pile up at least some wins before bye week start. But, you know, 2-4 in 6 leagues for me this week. I'm not overly concerned. It was raining in much of the Northeast. You had just complete duds from some really good players that I'm not worried about. So just if you weren't good, sit back, listen to the pod. We'll get you squared away for week two. We'll give you some waiver guys that are obviously waivers are processed in most leagues so far, but we can give you some guys that might still be out there in your league. So I totally agree. I'm not overreacting to poor or good performances after week one. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I always have a saying, if it happens once, it's a fluke, twice a coincidence, and third time becomes a trend. So don't overreact. There's plenty of time left. Jamar Chase, for example, he's not going to be a dud again next week, or Burrow's not going to be a dud again next week. It was just all about matchups and weather. So definitely don't overreact.
Yeah, and the key word there is overreact, right? Of course, use your eyes, take a look at the stats and all. But remember, this is just week one. Nowadays, a lot of the starters, especially on good teams, don't play in the preseason, right? So it's a tune-up game. And you also got to remember, these teams have been preparing for, 6-7 months now. Right? We watched the Eagles game. Belichick pulled out all kinds of crazy exotic blitzes and exotic zone schemes and stuff. Teams are not going to be able to implement, these crazy game plans, with only 1 week to prepare. So remember that. Keep that in mind. Don't panic. Don't overreact to week one. Always keep that in mind when you're, setting your lineups and when you're doing waivers. Trust your off-season preparation and stick to your guns when it comes to things that happen week one. They really are outliers. And once we get into the meat and potatoes, the grind of the season, that's when teams will show their true colors, and your fantasy team and real football teams will show their true colors.
When do you stop relying on what you thought preseason and shift to what's actually happening? Is it week 3? Is it week 4? Is it later than that? Is it sooner than that?
Usually for me, it's about week 3. If I keep seeing the same thing, for example, Cam Akers in that backfield, it looks like all last year all over again, where he's not getting all the carries. Kyron Williams comes in and is putting up more points than him. I'm starting to get a little nervous by week 2. By week 3, I'm like, all right, you're sitting down. It's time to give somebody else a chance. Time to try and find somebody on waivers. I give it about 2 to 3 weeks.
To be honest, I don't really put a set date on it. I don't want to say, oh, by week 3 or by week 4, that's when I'm ready to just burn it all down, and start over again or anything like that. I try and stay fluid. I try and pay attention to what I'm seeing on the field, right? But I don't want to put like a rigid set date or time on it because especially when it comes to, gambling and betting, it always seems to me like week 5 is when teams make a real change, right? And you think you have a beat on the league, you think you have a beat on the teams, and then they completely switch things up around week 5, right? So I don't like to put anything rigid on it. I just like to, look, see what's going on, trust my eyes, trust what the coaches are putting out there on the field, and then make adjustments. Honestly, you really should be starting, the guys that you drafted to be starters up until bye weeks. Bye weeks are really when you need to make your tougher decisions and make changes.
All right, let's get into week 1 and what went down with studs and duds from week 1. Where do I start? I'm pulling up my teams here. I had a lot of duds to talk about. I think the number one biggest surprise of the fantasy football season so far was Sunday Night Football. Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones, the New York Giants offense, complete dud. We just talked about teams have 7 months to prepare since the schedule comes out, 6 months, whatever it is. And honestly, I don't know what the Giants were doing during that time, but it wasn't designing easy plays for Daniel Jones. It wasn't focusing on ball security, and it certainly wasn't getting the ball in the hands of their best player, Saquon Barkley, early and often. Saquon Barkley burnt me. Everyone out there probably unanimously picked him in the first round of their fantasy league. Saquon Barkley, total dud in week 1. I do expect that to change week 2 when they travel to Arizona and play what I think is not a very good football team in the Arizona Cardinals. So he was a dud last week. I hope to God for me and my listeners and New York Giants Nation that we're talking about Saquon Barkley as a stud next week, because if he's not, the Giants are in trouble, and your first-round pick of Saquon Barkley might be in trouble.
Yeah, and it goes into the poll question, right? In that same exact game, Dak Prescott was a dud, and I lost in a few leagues because I had him at quarterback, but he didn't have to do anything, right? You can't overreact to that. It's not his fault that, the defense and special teams put up so many points and he didn't have to throw the ball down the field, right? So, that goes into the don't overreact to week 1, right? You have to kind of look at each situation independently and see exactly what happened and assess, right? So, yeah, Dak Prescott lost me a couple matchups this week, but you can't blame the man. The defense showed up, and vice versa. The defense was studly. I lost thinking a couple matchups thinking I had him won because the defense put up 40 points in multiple leagues.
Yeah, Mike, your Dallas defense only like 2 less points than Tyreek Hill just running silly out there in Los Angeles.
Yeah, they sure were. My dud comes from that Thursday night game. Jahmyr Gibbs, you picked him 12th overall in the first round, and you're going to give bulk of the carries to Montgomery. Like, I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting more pass attempts, targets, just touches in general. And, the Lions, depending on how your league is scored, he only scored between 5 and 7.5 points. Like, that's just not enough for the 12th overall pick. Why would you go that direction if you're not going to utilize him? So for me, even though he did score a couple points, it wasn't enough to justify. I think I got him in the 3rd round. I could have picked somebody like Calvin Ridley or something there that would have been a better pick.
I did watch that game in its entirety, and when Jahmyr, it didn't equate to fantasy points, but Jahmyr Gibbs looked electric with the football. He took contact well. He had caught a couple passes, so I think everyone, even though he was a dud this week and he got me 8 points in the league that I have him in, I do think that be patient with him. He's going to take over that backfield and be a stud for many weeks to come. And I think the people who got him in third, fourth, and fifth round of their fantasy draft, I think that's going to be a great long-term investment.
And I agree, and that goes to the overreaction. Like, I'm not overreacting. He's still going to be in my starting lineup. I was just a little disappointed in the first game. I figured they'd try show him off a little bit, with the nation watching.
I mean, you might as well stick with that game, right? You can't listen to everything that you hear and believe everything that you hear in the news. There's all kinds of coach speak that you'll hear about, right? But you got to trust the money. And yes, they did spend a high draft pick on Gibbs, but they also paid Montgomery a lot of money. So that shows how much they valued Montgomery before they even knew that they would have a chance at getting Gibbs. They spent a lot of money on Montgomery, and it showed, right? They gave him maybe 18 carries, something like that. He got quite a few touches, and that cut into Jahmyr Gibbs' overall fantasy production. So I do expect Detroit to have a very split backfield, similar to last season, where Jamal Williams set the record, right? Or led the league in rushing touchdowns. I do expect it to be a very split backfield this year in Detroit. But sticking with that game, the whole Kansas City receiving core were duds, absolute duds. And I'm not one to overreact, but I think this is a situation where you might seriously be able to drop Sky Moore and consider dropping Kadarius Toney if there's a hot waiver wire pickup that you want to add. I just don't understand. These guys, they had all off season to prepare. They knew that there was no real number one receiving option out there with Travis Kelce on the bench. Nobody stepped up. Nobody could get separation. Whenever they did get separation, the ball would clank right off their hands. I just don't understand it. So I'm completely out on the pass catchers in Kansas City, except for, obviously, the GOAT, Travis Kelce. But like I said, Sky Moore, I think he's an absolute cut. This is his second season, and he's shown to not make any strides. Didn't even really get any. He got 3 targets, no catches. And Kadarius Toney, yes, the man is electric with the ball in his hands, but he got to catch the ball, right? Stick him is illegal. So I don't know how the man's going to catch the ball, unless he puts in the work and figures it out. The whole Chiefs receiving core, duds, absolute duds.
I'll go with a stud. We'll stick with some receivers. Zay Flowers, we've talked about him in both of our episodes so far. Just steps in. No Mark Andrews, Odell Beckham, Rashid Bateman, non-factors. Zay Flowers rushes the ball 2 times. He catches 9 of 10 targets, double-digit fantasy points. He's really settling in there to be Lamar's go-to guy. He can run all the routes in the tree. He's dangerous after the catch. J.K. Dobbins, unfortunately, tears his Achilles in that game, so it looks like they're going to keep it in-house, do a running back by committee, but none of those backs in that committee are as talented as J.K. Dobbins. Jesse, I know you like J.K. Dobbins coming into the season.
Yeah.
Short, intermediate passing game, possession receiving, slants, quick bubble screens, that's right up Zay Flowers' alley. That's whatever he made his bread and butter at Boston College, and don't be surprised if he gets some splash plays in the running game with that backfield in question now. Clearly, after week 1, Zay Flowers is the receiver to own there in Baltimore. Obviously, things can change, but I really liked what I saw from Zay Flowers. They get the 25-9 win over Houston. And Lamar wasn't great. No one was really that great except Zay Flowers. He popped off the screen in that football game in his NFL debut. It would have been nice if – I'm sure Patrick Mahomes would have appreciated that if some of his Chiefs receivers played like Zay Flowers in that Thursday night loss to the Detroit Lions. So I like Zay Flowers in the preseason, and all my positivity was affirmed in that week 1 match against the Houston Texans. I love Zay Flowers.
I got to go with a guy that was on, I don't think any of our radar, out in Los Angeles, Puka, receiver for the Rams. 15 targets. And we know that Matthew Stafford, when he zones or zeroes in on a guy, he's just going to target them. Allen Robinson, was a nobody while he was out there, while Cooper Kupp was eating up those targets. And with Cooper Kupp on the mend, hamstring issue, Puka is definitely the receiver to have out there. Hamstrings are soft tissue. They can linger for weeks at end. He had to go see a specialist. So 15 targets, I mean, that's telling you rookie receiver Matthew Stafford trust. And I mean, Puka did not let him down. That was I was floored by that. I had no idea who this kid was until I'm watching Red Zone. I'm like, who is this guy just catching the ball the whole time? I thought it'd be Van Jefferson or Tutu Atwell instead, Puka. So, yeah.
Right. I didn't trust any of the camp hype around Puka. But look, the Rams have showed in the past to find late round draft picks. I think Puka was a 5th round draft pick. Late round draft pick wide receivers that they can mold and shape into NFL wide receivers. So maybe he's just the next guy in line, but I did not believe it. But you have to trust what you see, and all you can really predict, right? All you can really count on is opportunity, right? And you need to count on carries and targets, right? That's the opportunities. That's what fantasy is based on. That's how you get fantasy points, is getting opportunity. 15 targets for Puka. I think he might have led the league in targets week 1.
I believe he did, yes.
Yeah, led the league, or probably tied for the lead in targets in week 1. I know we're going to talk about him a little bit later in our waiver wire segment, but you got to believe what you see, because like Mike said, Cooper Kupp with that hamstring, soft tissue injury, anyone who's ever pulled a hamstring, they know that if you re-aggravate it and you pull it again, it's always worse the second time. And he was coming back from aggravating it and then re-aggravated it. So who knows how long Cooper Kupp is going to be out this season with that hamstring injury. I think you have to pick up Puka in any league if you need a wide receiver, any league that he's available. And he's actually available in a lot of leagues, surprisingly. Might as well keep going with wide receivers, but I'm going to go to a dud. And this is a dud that I don't want you to overreact to. T. Higgins, 0 catches on 8 targets. I don't know what happened in that Bengals game. I do know that it seems that, number one, the Bengals always seem to start off slow, right? I don't know if it's because Burrow doesn't play in the preseason and he's once again been hurt, coming into the season. So maybe that has something to do with it. I mentioned earlier that a lot of teams are treating week 1 as basically their ramp up game because they don't play in the preseason. But don't panic with T. Higgins. Yes, he is a dud for week 1. I know he hurt a lot of teams, but you can expect him to have a good season moving forward. He is a 1,100-yard receiver. He's proven it year in and year out. So don't let week 1 fool you. But yes, T. Higgins was a dud in week 1.
I also want to chime in real quick with that. T. Higgins isn't going to be playing against Greg Newsome and Denzel Ward every week. I mean, the Browns secondary, those 2 corners with Del Pitt, it's an elite secondary, and they've been elite for a couple of years. So Higgins is always probably going to get the second corner, and the second corner is not going to be a potential all-pro. So definitely don't overreact on Higgins.
And you can throw Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. I mean, 86-yard passing for Joe Burrow. That was rough. I mean, I'm putting everything in that game on the weather. Browns got the win 24-3. Amari Cooper didn't do anything. Nothing receiving really happened. Nick Chubb did his thing on the ground, which we would really set up well for him because of the weather. But that whole game was a dud. And, guys, I fear that I've fallen into the Kyle Pitts trap once again. I think he got 8 points for me. Points varied depending on my scoring system in those leagues, but didn't get the double-digit points. Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson accounted for all of their touchdowns. I think Bijan's was a passing touchdown, but it was a screen pass, de facto run, and Algier looks to be their goal line back. Is this just going to be like one of these other tight ends like Vernon Davis and these guys that get picked in the top 10 of the NFL draft and are just don't live up to their potential? I'm trying not to this is the one that I'm kind of like sweating out the most, Kyle Pitts, because I own him across the board. I like this value. I think the Falcons are a good team. I thought the tight end, and young, inexperienced quarterback, tight end can be a safety valve for, these young quarterbacks. I wish Kyle Pitts wasn't a dud, but I have to put him on the dud list. The only thing I hope is it gets better because, I'm
Kyle
scrambling
Pitts
for a touch.
Kyle Pitts is great. He is absolutely elite. He put up those yards last season despite terrible quarterback play. And this season, he has an even worse quarterback kind of throwing him the ball. Desmond Ridder is not an NFL quarterback. He's simply not an NFL quarterback. I know they're going to see what they have in him because they spent draft capital on him. And I don't think that they really mind if it's kind of a lost season and they get a high draft pick and possibly get one of these top quarterbacks coming out in the draft. Desmond Ridder's terrible. Absolutely terrible. And he is what is hindering Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts is a great player. He is everything that he was hyped up to be, he is. Desmond Ridder is the problem. He's terrible. Look at Drake London. Drake London's one of the best wide receivers in the league by all advanced metrics. What doesn't Drake London have? He doesn't have an NFL quarterback throwing him the ball.
Yeah, I don't want to lump Kyle Pitts in with top 10 tight ends that didn't pan out. I mean, this guy's a generational talent. You put him on any other team, and I mean, he's tearing it up. He's the hybrid, I think, of what they tried to find between a tight end and a receiver. He is that player. He'd just be a dominant player. You get him a good quarterback or even a halfway decent quarterback. I mean, just somebody that's going to target him. I put this on Arthur Smith and that offense. Like, they're just not targeting their two best playmakers. Well, I mean, Bijan's there, but Drake London and Kyle Pitts just aren't getting the targets that they should be getting. He's definitely, like I said, he's a generational player, and I don't know how long you want to stick with him in fantasy because, I mean, this is 2 years in a row now, but he's definitely a player that his situation is factoring in more than his talent.
Yeah, it's not Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith is an amazing coach. He's producing amazing running backs and amazing run games despite not having a quarterback out there. But he can't. He's not going to force Desmond Ridder to throw the ball down the field and turn the ball over. Desmond Ridder averaged, I think, 3 yards per attempt. He's terrible. He's even worse than Marcus Mariota. So the same thing that Arthur Smith did last season. He said, okay, you're terrible. You can't throw the ball, but you're the only quarterback I have. So we're just going to run the ball. And he's finding ways to win even with terrible quarterback. You get a decent quarterback out there in Atlanta, and the Falcons are going to win that division perennially. It's not Arthur Smith's fault. He's an amazing coach. It's Desmond Ridder, and he's terrible. He's got to go. He's got to go. I know it's only one game, but he's terrible. He's never going to be a good NFL quarterback. They're going to see what they have in him. I can't wait till he gets benched and they move forward.
I was going to say, and honestly, I know this isn't what Falcons fans want to hear, but this coming draft, there's probably 6-7 quarterbacks that are going to come out that are first-round picks that I would take any one of them over this current year's quarterbacks, the rookies that just came out. So, yeah.
So it's going to be a headache year for Kyle Pitts owners, is what I just heard.
Yeah, you know what else? It's going to be a headache year for DJ Moore owners. Have to throw one more dud out there. Love DJ Moore. He's an NFL pro. He's a #1 wide receiver. Justin Fields just is not an accurate quarterback. You know, he just cannot get the ball to him. Now, there will be some blowout games where DJ Moore either takes a screen, 60 yards to the house, or Justin Fields scrambles around, keeps the play alive, and chucks up a bomb, and DJ Moore catches it. But you're not going to get consistent fantasy production from DJ Moore because of inconsistent quarterback play. That's the only problem with wide receivers. You know, you love wide receivers in PPR leagues because, you know, they can catch 100 balls and go for 1,400 yards, right? But they're reliant on a quarterback. So you have to always keep that in mind. And that's something that I always try and keep in mind during draft season and draft prep. And I want all of you out there to keep in mind during draft season and draft prep, right? Look, #1 at talent. And then #2, you have to look at, do they have a quarterback that's at least good enough to get them the ball, right? Like Justin Jefferson. Luckily, he has Kirk Cousins, who's at least good enough to get him the ball. But a guy like Drake London could put up, not exactly the stats that Justin Jefferson puts up, but Drake London could easily be a 1,200-yard plus receiver. But he doesn't have a quarterback that can even get him the ball. You need at least a league average quarterback to be able to get top-notch wide receiver production. And yes, Justin Fields is electric, scrambling around back there. Yes, he's an electric and elite runner of the football. He is not an elite passer of the football at the NFL level.
Yeah, moving on to another dud. The Seattle Seahawks look terrible on Sunday. They're already banged up front. Geno Smith did not look the part. They didn't block one of the best defensive players of all time, Aaron Donald, for the majority of that football game. They get absolutely smoked by a team that nobody thought was going to be good this season, the Rams. DK Metcalf, Taylor Lockett, Jackson Jigba Smith, like nobody did good with that. I feel like that's because of that offensive line. So that's something to keep your eye on as they move into a big-time matchup with Detroit, who looks really ferocious up front. Could be another long day for Seattle. They were duds in week 1, and it wouldn't surprise me if this time next week we're talking about them as duds again. I can't really advocate sitting a DK Metcalf this early in the season, but if you definitely bump him down to, the flex tier of your overall rankings for week 2, I think. I mean, I didn't like what I saw from Seattle in the trenches, and I think it could be a long week again because Detroit's really good in the trenches.
And both of Seattle's starting offensive tackles are hurt. They might not play this week. I'm sorry, Mike, what were you going to say?
I was going to say they just signed Jason Peters, 41-year-old Jason Peters, to play left tackle. Yeah. So, yeah.
Former Eagle and former Cowboy, right?
Yep.
Probably going to go into the Hall of Fame one day, but, I mean, that Jason Peters ain't walking through the door for the Seattle Seahawks.
He should.
Exactly.
We've been kind of negative, it sounds like, so far at the start. And, it's understandable looking at some of our fantasy records week 1. Guys that we know will be great, but just did not perform week 1. But let's talk about a few studs, right? My boy, Nuke Hopkins, getting 13 targets. Now, he didn't put up a huge game, but like I said before, all you can really look for and hope for is opportunity, right? And then hopefully they excel with the opportunity. 13 targets for Nuke Hopkins, give me that all day, especially where he was going in drafts. Rob said he didn't have any upside. I think 13 targets is some upside.
I'm going to go with the best receiver of the weekend, Tyreek Hill. I got a lot of flack in a couple leagues because I drafted him 2nd, 3rd, and 4th overall, right behind Jefferson. I mean, Hill 44 points in most of my leagues. That's just unreal. Tua, yeah, he's got Waddle, but Hill's the guy over there, and he is just absolutely dominating. He's going for those 2,000 receiving yards. I mean, right now he's on pace for like 3,000. Like, just what he's doing right now, as long as Tua stays healthy, and it's a big if, I mean, he should be breaking that record, Offensive Player of the Year, awards, all this type of stuff. Like, Hill was a monster yesterday or Sunday.
You know what cracks me up every time I hear it? That Brandon Staley is supposed to be an offensive mind, or excuse me, a defensive mind and a defensive guru, and that's how he got his head coaching job out there with the Chargers. Brandon Staley, their defense is always terrible. How are you not going to double Tyreek Hill? You're just going to let him go off for almost a career year or a career game? I just don't understand it. And it's not just it was one game. Their defense is always terrible. I just don't understand how the man still has a job. And he's squandering the talents of Justin Herbert, who is honestly, arguably a top 3 quarterback in the league, in my opinion, just in terms of pure talent. But he can't get a head coach, that can actually help him in any way.
I mean,
yeah, and they're supposed to bring in Kellen Moore to like complement the defensive mind of Brandon Staley. Kellen Moore did his job Sunday. They put up 34 points. Doesn't mean anything when your defensive-minded head coach can't put any type of scheme together to let up less than 34, get you the win. I mean, Tyreek Hill is running wide open the entire time. It was like shooting fish in a barrel for Tyreek Hill on Sunday. He's unbelievable. You got to have a better plan for your defensive-minded head coach for Tyreek Hill.
I don't want to let Kellen off the hook. He did have some – I mean, I watched that game. He still had some schematic things that they could have worked on. They could have scored instead of going so run-heavy when you were in a shootout. And, I mean, Brandon Staley, I think this is his last year. The amount of talent that's on that defense, Joey Bosa, Derwin James, Sante Samuel Jr., like they should not be giving up that type of they should not be allowing that to happen. So, I think this is his last year there.
Yeah, I don't know who gets fired first, him or Eberflus, but one of them is gone, for sure. But you can't put that on Kellen Moore. I mean, his job is to score points. They put up 34 points. You got to be able to win when you put up 34 points.
My man, another stud. My man, Chris Olave, Offensive Player of the Year pick. Double-digit targets, holding 8 catches, 112 yards. Not much scoring in that Saints Titans game, so he didn't get in the end zone, but that's an encouraging start for Chris Olave and in his continuing trendward up to being a top 10, possibly top 5 fantasy wide receiver for years to come. And his boy, Michael Thomas. We had a Michael Thomas sighting on Sunday. He was on the field. He did good. He got some targets. He made some catches. So, I mean, that was encouraging to see Michael Thomas. That could be a very dynamic offense down there in New Orleans once they start gelling with their new quarterback, Derek Carr. Very encouraged with what I saw from the Saints, Chris Olave and Michael Thomas. I'll throw them both together.
Yeah, Michael Thomas is my old head, man. As long as he can stay healthy and stay on the field, he will produce. But one more stud, since we're talking about wide receiver studs. The hardest decision in the draft this year for me was whether I should pick Chris Olave or Calvin Ridley. And honestly, it looks like, at least if week 1 is any predictor, that I'd be fine with either one, because Calvin Ridley was an absolute stud in week 1. He looks like he is back to his old ways. He looks like he is easily a top 10 wide receiver, maybe even a top 5 wide receiver in the game again. And he's out there on a mission. Has a great offensive-minded head coach in Doug Peterson to help scheme him open. Was beating double teams even when they tried to double team him, and has Trevor Lawrence to get him the ball. So he checks off all the boxes. Calvin Ridley was absolute stud week 1. I expect him to continue to be a stud every week and be a wide receiver 1.
It wouldn't be a great show without a little homerism for me. So I'm going to go with my stud, the Cowboys defense. They're probably the second highest scoring in most leagues. And, I mean, this is 3 years in a row where they're just turning the ball over. The last 2 years, they led the league in turnovers. Looks like that trend is going to continue. I mean, the Giants fumbled 5 times. They were able to get on 4 of them, but still, I mean, they were fumbling left and right and interceptions. They racked up like 7 sacks, 2 scores, and I expect that to continue with Zach Wilson coming in the building this week. He's in for a rough day, especially in that offensive line. 4 plays and Aaron Rodgers is hurt. What is Zach Wilson about to face when that Dallas D is just coming after him?
All right, I'm calling for an investigation. I know DraftKings has a major headquarters in New York. They were getting a whole lot of money bet on the Giants, and then somehow Dallas just comes out and shuts them out, puts up 40 points in fantasy. No, I want an investigation. I want to see exactly what happened. Someone needs to look behind the scenes.
All right, we're going to move on to some of our waiver picks, help you out for week 2, fill in for some of them injuries, some of them duds. But let's hear from our friends at Royal
Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years, and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor,
and fun.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
And again, that's our friends at Royal Billiards. Anything you can need for your man cave, there it is, royalbilliards.com. Dartboards, pool tables, card tables, dart supplies, bars, and bar stools. Turn any ordinary room into an extraordinary gaming experience. They have hot tubs, too. Shop Royal Billiards. They're located 515 Bethlehem Pike in Colmar, Pennsylvania. So check them out for all your all your game room needs. Turn your man cave into something extraordinary with Royal Billiards. All right, let's get into some waiver claims. Look, the elephant in the room is Puka Nacua. 15 targets, looks to be the wide receiver 1. I mean, I didn't get him in any leagues. I didn't bid enough money, but I mean, that's got to be the number 1 waiver claim of the entire weekend, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I didn't get him in any leagues either. I was outbid in every single one. When you get 15 targets, the league takes notice. This is reminiscent of when Amon-Ra St. Brown, his rookie year, just coming out, grabbing all those targets. Puka was all over the field. Matthew Stafford clearly had a favorite option, and he locks in. So if you're able to get Puka, definitely, I would say probably bid a little bit more than you were thinking. He went anywhere from $20 to $45 in my leagues.
Yeah, obviously he's a top waiver wire wide receiver. I want to see it again. I have Tutu Atwell in a lot of dynasty leagues. He put up a big game. I just want to see it again. I don't want to overreact to week one, but like both Mike and Rob said, 15 targets. All you can ask for is opportunity in fantasy. If he's going to get 15 targets or anywhere near that a week, he's going to be a regular starter.
We talked about the Chiefs wide receivers being a dud. The one Chiefs wide receiver that actually caught a touchdown pass on Thursday Night Football in that opener was Rashee Rice, the rookie out of SMU. Even with Travis Kelce potentially coming back, looks like he is going to come back this Sunday in Jacksonville against the Jaguars, which should be a great game. They're still going to need a receiver to step up. Kadarius Toney, by all means, he's a drop. We talked about Sky Moore. Then you have Scantling and different guys like that. Rashee Rice has a real opportunity to seize target share in Kansas City. So I would be looking to add Rashee Rice. I already have Rashee Rice on a bunch of my teams from the back end of drafts because I love them in preseason. I just love his situation. I mean, you said look at the quarterback situation in Atlanta, and it stinks. Couldn't be more opposite. And in Kansas City, they got maybe the GOAT there in Patrick Mahomes. If Rashee Rice gains his trust, which looks like he's on the way in doing, I mean, he could get all the opportunity on the outside there for Rashee Rice. So go pick up Rashee Rice.
I got to go with a running back here, Josh Kelly. A couple things to note. Austin Eckler is nursing an ankle. There is some belief that it might be a high ankle sprain. And the Chargers have a bye week 5. There's speculation that he could be an IR candidate. We're going to know more soon. I know he didn't practice today. By the end of the week, I think they'll have a better idea. But Josh Kelly, even without that news, put up points. I think he had like 15, 16 points. With Kellen Moore, definitely a more run-heavier offensive coordinator. Kelly's going to be there getting opportunities. And if Eckler is going to be missing any amount of time, I mean, he becomes an RB1 immediately and a must start. So definitely be on the lookout for Josh Kelly. I think he offers a lot of upside right now.
Yeah, maybe this is Kelly's year to break out. I know the Chargers have been looking for a number 2 running back to complement Austin Eckler, who is a little bit smaller in stature, has a little bit of an injury history. So they want to try and limit some of his touches, or at least the in between the tackles touches, where a smaller body like that might lead to more injuries. I do want to see it again from Kelly. I want to see, he's had games in the past where he has put up some points, but I do want to see it again. Continuing on with the running back theme, I do think that this was a bigger running back waiver run than it was a wide receiver waiver run. I think even ahead of Josh Kelly, I think the number 1 waiver wire ad for running back for sure. The only one that could rival him, for any position, I guess, might be Puka Nacua. But the number 1 running back ad should be Gus Edwards, right? We mentioned earlier J.K. Dobbins going down with an Achilles injury. Of course, the running back that I draft in every league gets hurt week 1 and goes down with an injury, a season-ending injury. This seems to be the story of my fantasy life the last 2 years. But Gus Edwards has proven in the past that he can step in to the number 1 role and perform as a maybe like low end fantasy wide receiver 1, high end running back 1, high end running back 2 for fantasy. They love him there in Baltimore. I don't believe in Justice Hill. If you remember, maybe 2 years ago now, when Dobbins got hurt when he tore his Achilles, Justice Hill came in, had a big game, and then I want to say maybe a week or 2 later, he was cut and put on the practice squad, right? I don't believe in Justice Hill. I think Gus Edwards is the best back there in Baltimore, and I think he needs to be owned in every league if he's out there and available.
I'm going to look at New England. Obviously, I got a strong look at the Patriots, watching the Eagles and the Patriots at 425 here in the Philadelphia market. Kendrick Bourne, no one's rivaling him for targets on the outside there. And Hunter Henry, Mac Jones likes him in the red zone. I read about it all offseason. Now, Mac Jones and Hunter Henry had this great rapport, especially in the red zone. I think both those guys should be owned on your fantasy team. they're going to have to score points in that division. You got a point a division with the Bills. You have a division with the Dolphins. You know, they play in the prime time slot against the Miami Dolphins. Mac Jones is going to need to build some trust with those two guys for them to score the kind of points they need to make the playoffs in a very fierce AFC. At least after week one, I believe. I mean, I'm not going crazy with my fab budget with either of those guys. Probably more so Hunter Henry because tight end's thinner. And I already talked about how I have Kyle Pitts on a bunch of my teams. So Hunter Henry was a big grab for me this week. And Bill Belichick loves Kendrick Bourne. He's the top receiver there. If you're the top receiver on a NFL roster and you're going to get most of the targets on the outside there, he's got to be owned on your fantasy football team. So little tag team Patriots tandem right there that showed me something in week one that I think should be on people's fantasy teams, especially in 12, 14, 16 team leagues. You can grab them. Go ahead and do it.
Just keep in mind, though, that Devonta Parker did not play in that game. So
yeah,
I just want to see how the targets iron out with him healthy and on the field. And healthy is always a question mark for Devonta Parker. But I do think that he is the best wide receiver that's on their roster. Now, whether he gets the most targets or whether he can get on the field is another question. But I do believe that Devonta Parker is the best wide receiver in New England.
If you need a quarterback, because I know Rodgers went down, I would definitely look at Matthew Stafford. He was available in, I think, around 80-85% of the leagues. Matthew Stafford, he had a solid game. With Rodgers going down, I definitely think you look for a guy that's got experience. He's got the receivers out there, Tutu and Puka, with Cooper Kupp on the way. And I think Matthew Stafford just offers a great opportunity if you do need a quarterback. If you're in a 2-quarterback league or you're in a 12-team league and there's not much left available, I think Matthew Stafford is probably the best option.
Yeah, people forgot about Matthew Stafford. He was hurt last season, but they forgot that he is an elite quarterback, both in the real NFL, and he can be elite with the right weapons in fantasy. But it's also why I didn't understand why so many people were on Seattle and expecting them to blow out the Rams. Matthew Stafford is a good enough quarterback that he can keep his team in a game alone, really, and he showed that in week one.
And they retooled that offensive line for him too. So, I mean, he's got better protection this year. He's going to feel more comfortable.
Exactly.
Yeah. I saw Derek Carr available in a couple of my leagues as well. If you did have Rodgers, I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer. He's got a cushy matchup on Monday Night Football this week against the Carolina Panthers. And Chris Olave and Michael Thomas were two of my studs from week one. He's got the receivers. He's got the weapons. Not much of a running game down there. We'll see what transpires with that, but Derek Carr can sling it, and this is the best situation Derek Carr's ever had. So, if you do need a quarterback and Derek Carr's out there, I would go grab him as well.
Yeah, this is going to be a fine year to stream quarterback off the waiver wire. I think you're not going to get the top end performers because you're not going to get guys off the waiver wire that are going to run the ball and throw the ball. That's really going to be the upper echelon of fantasy quarterback nowadays. But guys like you said, Derek Carr, Matthew Stafford, Jordan Love look fine. I think Sam Howell is going to have his games, especially when his receiving core is healthy. Geno Smith is going to have better days for sure. So there's guys out there that you're going to be able to pick up off of waivers and start. So I do think that don't panic if you have Daniel Jones. He didn't have a good game. I saw Anthony Richardson in a few leagues was available. There are quarterbacks off the waiver wire that you can plug and play. Brock Purdy, someone that everyone wanted to doubt coming into the league, had a great game against what some people thought would be the second best defense in the league. So there are waiver wire quarterbacks out there. I wanted to stick with running back since I said running back is the theme of waivers for this week. If you need a running back, I think Zach Moss, once he gets on the field, will be a startable running back for you. Now, he doesn't have a whole bunch of upside. He's not going to be an amazing running back, right? But he's a little bit of a plotter. But he is an NFL running back. I do believe he's the best running back in Indianapolis, and he has a running quarterback and that always opens up the run game. I don't expect Jonathan Taylor to play this season. I think he has to come back by week 6, I want to say, or he forfeits his money for the season. But I don't expect him to play. Week 8, okay. I don't expect him. I really don't expect him to play. Whether he comes up with a phantom injury or whether he works out something with Irsay and he just sits for the season. So I think Zach Moss, if you can get him off of waivers, he'll be a great ad, and he might actually be able to start for you the entire season.
I'm going to go deeper, a little deeper if you're in a deeper, more competitive league. Robert Woods turned back the clock on Sunday. He had 10 targets, caught most of them. I mean, he proved to be a very safe, reliable safety blanket for a young quarterback in C.J. Stroud. I never thought the Ravens were going to lose that game, but they were in it enough to make the Ravens think about it. And Robert Woods being that safety blanket for C.J. Stroud, I grabbed Robert Woods in a couple of my deeper leagues. John Mechie didn't play. We talked about him last week, maybe 2 weeks ago. Nico Collins is kind of boom or bust. So Damian Pierce in that running game didn't get on track at all Sunday. So someone's got to do something there. Someone's going to get stats. So and maybe it's going to be Robert Woods. I think it's worth a flyer if you're in a deeper competitive league. Again, don't go crazy with your fab. He's not going to – you want to spend your fab on guys that you think can potentially, just a complete oversight by us, you, all your buddies in your fantasy league, all your group chats that might potentially win you your league. That's where you spend your fab, not on the Hunter Henrys, Kendrick Bournes, Robert Woodses of the world. I don't know how strongly you feel about your waiver wire picks, but I the only guy I really went nuts on, and I only bid $15 on him, was Puka out in the Rams, and it wasn't nearly enough to get him in any of my leagues. But give Bobby Trees a look if you need a receiver and you're in a deeper league.
I got to go with Kyron Williams. Looks like the Rams are starting all over again with Cam Akers, this whole thing where he just isn't the lead back. I mean, he ended on the strong note last year, and then lo and behold, week 1, Kyron Williams is eating up 50, 55, 60% of the touches down there. Thankfully, Cam Akers had a late touchdown that kind of salvaged a little bit of his value, but it looked like Kyron Williams was the guy. I mean, Cam Akers got 20 carries for 2.2 yards per carry or something like that. I mean, that's just not going to get it done. And Kyron comes in with half that and gets like 57 yards and touchdown and stuff. So if you have Cam Akers, I'd strongly suggest trying to get a handcuff and putting Kyron on that bench just in case they decide to go full on Kyron Williams.
Definitely get him as a handcuff. But Akers, like you said, still had 22 carries. Yeah, Kyron, he was salvaged. His week was salvaged and bailed out by touchdowns, right? And touchdowns are fickle. But touches, carries, targets, that's the only thing you can really predict and project moving forward. So I do still think that Cam Akers should have a decent season. And like I said, he did get 22 carries. So it's not like he didn't get any work at all. He just didn't do anything with the carries. And honestly, that might be more concerning than not getting carries, right?
Yeah.
All right. Before we get into week 2, if we've got a little time left, let me tell you about hats.com. There's the promo code Philly for 15% off your order. In 2018, Eagles legend Brian Dawkins was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. To commemorate this moment, B-Dawk designed and launched an exclusive congratulatory Bowman hat company, America's oldest hat maker, on hats.com. Brian's love of hats and the Eagles were on proud display in Canton. And now you can find yourself in that hat, the same iconic Hall of Fame fedora. Just go to hats.com, search Brian Dawkins, and use the Philly promo code for 15% off. And you can catch Dawk Talk, Brian Dawkins, the GOAT of Philadelphia athletes, every other Thursday exclusively here on A2D Radio. So keep your eyes open for that. Week 2, well, let's do our survivor pick. Jesse almost ruined the $1 million Real Talk fantasy entry. We agreed on the Ravens, never changed it. The Commanders got it done, though, so we'll forgive them. To me, guys, it's down to 2. It's either the Buffalo Bills hosting the Raiders, or it's what was the other one? Detroit hosting the Seattle Seahawks. I have Buffalo in my personal survivor pool, so if we want to change it up on the show, I'm totally down for that. I don't like Yeah, sorry, I just don't like what's coming out of Seattle about that offensive line at all.
Yeah. Personally, I'd probably lean Buffalo. They got humiliated on Monday Night Football. Josh Allen, even though he is a turnover machine, I mean, he took credit for that loss, and all he had to do was just not turn over the ball. Jimmy G's ailing. I think he has an ankle. He did not practice this week. And I just see this opportunity. Let's just get the Bills out of the way so we don't even have to think about taking them later in the season, because I don't think they're the team that they were last year, but I think they definitely have enough to get past the Raiders. And, I mean, let's just move on and get to next week, because the Bills, they have to show up this week. Otherwise, they're going to be 0-2 in a division that they can't afford to be 0-2 in.
Yeah, I like it. I like West Coast teams that come east and the game starts at 1, which is the case in the Las Vegas Buffalo game.
Yeah, look. Well, number one, Rob, get that out of your head, because that old school trend is completely dead now. West Coast teams coming out to the east for 1:00 games are actually winning a lot of the games and covering a lot of spreads. Just putting that out there. But we won't get too deep into the numbers because for the sake of time. But I don't believe in getting too cute when it comes to Survivor in the first couple of weeks. Look, if you make it, deep into the season, you're going to have to make tough decisions anyway, right? So make the easy decisions now and make sure you can make it, deeper into the season. That's why I think that Buffalo should be the pick. Like we said before, other picks that we consider, Detroit being at home, getting Seattle. It's a division game, but with Seattle and their offensive tackles in question, I think Aiden Hutchinson is going to feast on Seattle's offensive line. So I don't see why Detroit wouldn't win the game. So I definitely think they're in consideration. I've heard people talk about Tampa Bay because Chicago is terrible. I'll just leave it at that. I think San Francisco is always a good pick, and I don't believe in LA. I don't believe that the Rams are as good as they showed that they were last week. And another potential pick, Mike, you talked about the Bills getting embarrassed, and they definitely have to show up this week. Well, another team that certainly should be embarrassed for their performance in week 1, the New York Giants going on the road. And I don't think it's a bad idea to have, especially if you have multiple Survivor entries, to have one entry where you just simply fade the Arizona Cardinals at all season. And the Giants go out to Arizona. Don't like picking road game or away teams this early in the season. But if the Giants don't show up against Arizona and win that game, you might as well kiss their whole season goodbye.
So one thing about the Giants, though, that offensive line, I mean, it's already terrible. It's ailing even more. They're all pro. Andrew Thomas has a hamstring. He injured it on that blocked field goal. And, I mean, the Cardinals just sacked Sam Howell 6 times yesterday or Sunday. So, I mean, that D-line is getting after him. And, I mean, Daniel Jones, you saw it Sunday night, was running for his life. And, I mean, he wasn't even looking down the field. He missed a wide open Waller. He missed a couple of guys just running wide open because he just didn't have time. So that's my one concern with the Giants offense line ailing. Could we see not a repeat of the 40-0, but could we see them in a dogfight because they can barely move the ball? Because the Cardinals, even though their front office may be tanking, like we said last week, players don't tank because they're playing for their next contract and they want to put that game film on for the next employer. So I do worry about that offensive line for the Giants.
All right, a few minutes left here on this episode. Let's get into some of these week 2 games. Guys, me and Jesse, I'm right here in the Philadelphia market, as is Jesse. Mike's down there in Tennessee. I think this Eagles-Vikings game has all the makings of the highest scoring game of the week. Any flex decision, I usually don't advocate for Thursday Night Football because I hate it. It's a short week, but the Eagles defense is banged up. The Vikings defense isn't good. The Vikings are coming off a loss to the Tampa Bay Bucks. So you're obviously starting Jefferson and Hurts and A.J. Brown and Devontae. But, if you're in a deeper league and you need Quez Watkins, I think DeAndre Swift shows up this week. Kenny Gainwell's not playing. Rashard Penny should be active. The Eagles linebackers, it's a ghost town there. I think they could hurt the Eagles on the run with Madison. And then I like Addison and KJ Osborne as well as potential flex plays in this game. I think it's a shootout on Thursday Night Football. I'm getting every share I can of this game in terms of DFS and my season-long fantasy lineups. Over-under 49.
I couldn't agree anymore. I do think you missed one name for this game, and that's Hawkinson. The Eagles don't have linebackers, and you saw what Hunter Henry did. He was feasting across the middle. I mean, Bill O'Brien, once he realized that he could go down the middle, that's where that offense started looking. And who's going to be down that middle, because Jefferson is on the outside getting double teamed, and Addison, he showed up last week. It's going to be Hawkinson. I think Hawkinson has a monster game. I mean, the Eagles for the next couple of weeks, until they prove they can stop the tight end, until they prove that they can close down that middle of the field, that's exactly where teams are going to attack. That's what the NFL does. It's a copycat league. They saw what the Patriots did. I think Vikings are going to try and exploit that middle.
Yeah, keep in mind that James Bradbury is out as well, the Eagles' number 2 cornerback. So I think Addison should feast. I think he could have a game. And, of course, Hawkinson. And I think you might be able to play tight ends all season against the Eagles. Only other game on the week 2 schedule that I think could rival this game for a potential shootout is Kansas City, Jacksonville. Two prolific offenses. This is going to end up being a yearly AFC rivalry game that we're always looking forward to. Love Trevor Lawrence, obviously love Patrick Mahomes. If the Chiefs pass catchers can catch the ball, and especially if Kelsey can get back on the field, I think that this could be an easy shootout.
I like Calvin Ridley in this game a lot. Amon-Ra St. Brown in the Thursday night opener. He hit him early and often in those short intermediate crossing routes. Obviously, that's a big staple of what Detroit wants to do. But, I mean, Calvin Ridley, he's the same type of receiver as Amon-Ra St. Brown. He can hurt you with that speed and quickness in the middle of the field. So if he can find some pockets, it could be a big day for Calvin Ridley. I totally agree with Jesse about this game being a potential shootout. I mean, with those 2 quarterbacks, it's kind of hard for it not to be.
Yeah, Christian Kirk is back in play. Did not have a good week 1. I see Christian Kirk, honestly, in this offense running some of the shorter routes. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he is not the same receiver as Calvin Ridley. Yes, he's a good receiver, but Ridley is a downfield attacker that can attack double teams down the field. He's not really that intermediate. He can run every route, but they utilize him down the field, at least in week 1. And when he was with the Falcons, obviously, he was a down the field threat. So I think Christian Kirk, I think Evan Ingram would be the guys to attack Kansas City over the middle. Do keep in mind, though, Chris Jones signed his contract 1-year deal, so he should be playing. That is going to make the Chiefs' defense a little bit better. So let's hope he doesn't get pressure up the middle with Trevor Lawrence. But I expect this game to be a shootout. 2 prolific offenses.
A lot of low totals this week. I'm looking at it. I mean,
only other exciting game, I don't know if it's going to be a shootout, but rookie quarterback versus rookie quarterback, right? The Colts go to Houston to play the Texans. I'm excited to see that game. I think this is going to be a rivalry we're going to see hopefully for years to come with Anthony Richardson versus Stroud.
Then the bronze medal game in terms of shootouts, I think, would be the Sunday night game. Miami going up to Foxborough, taking on Angry Bill. Like, Angry Bill is going to have a way better plan than Brian Staley to potentially stop Tyreek Hill. So I wouldn't surprise me at all if Bill's going to let everyone else beat him besides Tyreek Hill. So look for that run game. Look for Jalen Waddle to do better. And Mac Jones is going to have to score points. So if you have to start Hunter Henry and Kendrick Bourne, who I talked about as waiver wire pickups, I think this is a good spot to do it. Obviously, I wouldn't feel great about that. I'm still trying to trust my studs that I drafted. But if you have to, you have to. And I think Kendrick Bourne and Hunter Henry are good plays for the Patriots, along with the running game up there in New England, Ramondre Stevenson.
Yeah, I got to go with the Saints-Panthers game. I like, I don't think it's going to be a shootout, but I definitely see a lot of points getting put up. Derek Carr is going to take advantage of that Panthers secondary, that Panthers defense in general. Olave is going to eat. Michael Thomas is going to eat. I know Jesse touched on that earlier. Definitely, I love that game.
Yeah, I think the Panthers defense is a little better than people give them credit for. They just don't have any receiving weapons on offense. I hope Bryce Young, I hope they bring some guys in for Bryce Young. I hope DJ Shark comes back this season and can produce and give them a downfield target because they're just lacking offensive weapons. I think the Panthers could actually be a decent team if they just got some offensive talent around Bryce Young. But Bryce Young looked like the truth. He looked like an NFL quarterback. He was calm, cool, collect in the pocket. I know he's undersized, but he doesn't let that affect him. And I hate when stuff like that gets overblown. It's not like he came from the Sun Belt conference or some small conference. The man dominated in the SEC. He went up against NFL talent week in, week out and dominated it. So, his size, he's used to it, right? He's used to being smaller behind that line. And he looked comfortable and fine back there. He finds his holes in his pockets and his lanes to throw through. So, you said that next year's quarterback class is going to be better than this year's. And I do believe you're right, especially in terms of the top end talent. But I believe Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, and Anthony Richardson belong in the NFL. They belong in this league.
All right, we got to wrap it up. Jesse King, Mike Everly, I'm Rob Brinkman. Good luck in week 3, everyone. Let us know what you think in the comments. We'll try and circle back to as many comments as we can before the Sunday 1 o'clock kicks. So until week 3, peace out, everybody.